Good morning, members, officers and members of the public, and welcome to the meeting of the City of London Corporation's Culture, Heritage and Libraries Committee today, Monday the 3rd of November 2025 at Guildhall. The public element of today's meeting is being live streamed, and those participating in the meeting have given consent to their inclusion. The recording will be available on the City Corporation's YouTube channel following the meeting and will be retained for up to 1 municipal year. Item 1 is apologies, and I have apologies from Montserrat and Mark Wheatley, and we have a few members who are running late and will be here shortly. We have a couple of members online, James St John Davis and Irem Yedelem.
Thank you, Town Clerk. Just to add to that, a warm welcome back to Matthew Bell, who is back on the committee again. So great to see you, and great to see all members here this morning. So a very warm welcome, Town Clerk.
Thank you. Item 2 is declarations under the Code of Conduct in respect of items on the agenda. Are there any declarations that haven't already been made online?
I'm not seeing any, no.
Thank you. Item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting on the 22nd of September. To approve.
Thank you. Any points to be made, or can we agree the minutes of the previous meeting? Not seeing any points, so that's agreed. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 4 is to note the forward plan.
Forward plan, just to note, is that a hand, Melissa? Melissa, coming to you.
Yes, on the forward plan, it refers to the Billingsgate Roman baths, but it doesn't say when there's going to be an update on that. Can that be scheduled in so we know when it's going to be discussed?
Thank you. Yes, we don't discuss it very often, I must say, and I think we probably should. But Omkar, can we perhaps put a commitment to discuss Billingsgate Bathhouse at some point? Sorry, some chuntering there. What was that, Bronick? Adam.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure whether this is forward plan or actions coming out of the last board meeting, the last committee meeting rather. If the point that I want to make is that we have dates when the things start. We don't have any dates when they might end, and there doesn't seem to be any progress at all between the last meeting we had and this meeting. And I just wonder whether people are actually, someone is doing something about it.
Yes, thank you, Adam. So yes, there is progress on various actions that are listed in the action chart. You're right, there's not a sort of completion date. Omkar, without wanting to put you on the spot, if you want to comment on any of the actions that have been happening since the last meeting.
Chair, thank you. I can respond to the actions if I just rattle through them from the top down, if that's okay with everyone. So the first action was arranging a session with the audience agency. Anne will be joining us at this meeting for that Q&A, so that is complete. The second action was to provide further information on potential partner organisations and stakeholders involved in the strategy report. So in item 9, there was an appendix which contained a full list of all those that have been consulted to date. So that action is closed. Next one, members to be consulted with the latest version of definition of culture. We had a separate working group with chair and deputy, and we're bringing an update back to this committee. So I think that action is contained within there. Full list of cultural assets on the member portal. An email has gone to the deputy town clerk just to approve that update before it is published on the member portal. Forward plan of Guildhall Yard events. I have been in touch with the remembrancers, and we are working to coordinate, have a more coordinated approach to the events that are happening that are suitable for general public updates to be made, and they will be consolidated onto the City of LDN website. Bostock Room is one with the town clerk. Jane, do you want to update on that? Yep, I said expected completion by end of 2025.
I can speak to that. That's okay.
Yes.
So that's fine, and as it says there on the progress update, that is still correct at the moment. I will give you any update if I hear any details as we get closer to December, but at the moment we're on track.
Thank you. The next one is on the repairs to the accidental damage on the Beckford plaque. This has not been repaired yet, but there are conversations in progress with the manufacturer, and we're also looking at other individuals in order to give us a estimate to have that repair completed. The next one is with DTC, Deputy Town Clerk, who is not here. I can't give an update on that one. It's regards to the stagecoach. And the last one is the breakdown of costs on ruling the city's past, which is complete.
The Deputy Town Clerk's, I'm supporting him with putting together a report on the stagecoach, which I think will be ready by the end of the year.
Just one point on that action. We did discuss this in the call over as to whether or not it should include the word management. Sorry, not management, ownership. It's a report on the oversight, ownership and management. I think when we last discussed the matter, it was whether or not we should bring the totality of the stagecoach under one committee, which would obviously include who owns it as well as anything else. So I think that needs to be included in that action, please. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you for drawing that to our attention, Adam. A probably lesson to be learned is if we can try and have updates on the actions, then members have got a clear idea of what has or has not happened. Layla.
Sorry, to clarify, this map of cultural assets will be available on the members portal sort of when? I mean, how long does it take to do something like that? Something quite small, it would seem to me.
Onkar, do we have a timeline for that?
I've emailed the Deputy Town Clerk. As soon as he responds, we can make that update within days. It's just a response for him to confirm that is he is responsible for that area. I'll chase him. He was, I think, supposed to be here, but we'll try and get it done by the end of the week.
Later, why don't you chase me at the end of the week if it has not happened? Thank you. Any other points? No. Thank you. So we can move on, Town Clerk.
Our next item is item 5. That's Inspiring London Through Culture Fund, and that is the annual update. Mark, did you want to say anything about this one?
Chair, I believe I'm doing the update on this. Thank you and good morning, members. So I'm very pleased to present the annual report for the Inspiring London Through Culture programme, which forms part of the Central Grants programme, so City of London Small Grants programme. The committee should note that grants were awarded last year, and there's a list of them in Appendix 2. But there was we have brought this annual report to you slightly later because we wanted to also provide an analysis of the last 5 years of the Inspiring London Through Culture programme, which can be found at Appendix 3. You'll see that this is a small grant programme. It does have a small annual budget, but it does have quite a large impact. And also it's worth noting that we're working with our colleagues in the culture team around how this fund can adapt to the new cultural strategy, and we'll be looking to bring back some reports on that later in the year, early next year. So yeah, happy to take any questions. The papers for information. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, well, we like small budget, large impact. So certainly noted on that. Questions? John Foley.
Thank you, Chair. You've mentioned the core criteria, 4 core criteria, 4 times in this report. Fascinating. But I just wondered about, because it's 3 of them about the City of London. And then the second one is enhance London's creative future. Is that the whole of London, Greater London? Because it seems to say London rather than City of London. Thank you.
Thank you. So all projects demonstrably need to take place in the City of London, but you know, they are contributing to London's creativity. So I think that's why that criteria is named that way. Again, we are looking at reviewing the criteria specifically because sometimes it can be confusing. People think that they can do projects taking place in different parts of London, which isn't the case.
So if Brixton come to you with a scheme, as long as it takes place here in the city, that's okay, it's eligible.
Absolutely. So it's very much open for organisations looking to do something creative within the city, so they can come from any part of London or outside. So yeah, it's looking at bringing a diversity of the cultural offer through these small enabling grants.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm concerned about paragraph 26 on page 30, which seems to suggest that we should be spending more money on various projects, and I wonder why we're not.
Sorry, I'm just looking for the
So given the abundance of key heritage sites and collections across city. That's 5 years in heritage data.
I am going to pass over to my colleague Sheena, who is online, who delivered this report and has the detail.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you, Chair. Yes, the point made on in paragraph 26 is that in comparison to other cultural funding schemes, for example, the Arts Council's project grants, over the last 5 years, Inspiring London Through Culture has invested less in the visual arts and heritage than one might expect. But we undertook some further research with Ruby in the culture team, and actually what was happening is we're not getting applications from the heritage sector and visual arts. It's not that the panel are turning them down. So one of the recommendations in the future when we're looking at the new fund is how can we ensure that all the different sectors that fall within culture, arts and heritage are encouraged to apply to this fund.
Thank you, Wendy. Did you have a follow-up?
Thank
Okay.
you for that. It's interesting.
I think it's a really good point as well, and thank you for raising it. We certainly need to make sure we're attracting more requests from that sector. Helen.
I'm so sorry to interrupt here. I think the point in paragraph 26 relates to museums and heritage, not visual arts, doesn't it? If we look on page 31, the £17,710 in the table at the top relates to museums and heritage, not visual arts.
Yes, it's both sectors that are underrepresented in Inspiring London Through Culture over the last 5 years. So in both heritage specifically and visual arts separately. And so the plan would be to encourage more applications with the new Inspiring London Through Culture fund next year and onwards from both sectors.
Thank you, Sheena. Helen Fenton.
Thank you. I guess my question is more about value for money, which I see as one of the criteria that's listed for awarding grants to these organisations or for these services, I guess you could call them. But I don't see anything about how the value for money is assessed, or of things that we've funded previously, how we know that that they've done what they said they were going to do.
Thank you, Chair. So the Central Funding and Charity Management team have, really good expertise in grant making. All grants are assessed not just against criteria. We look at due diligence across each of the organisations that apply, and we look at the budget, scrutinise them, benchmark them. We also have an officer panel who makes decisions. So our team only makes recommendations to that panel, and that's made up of cultural officers from across the City of London and some external partners. So they have a lot of experience around this. We also, any salaries, we make sure they're not just London living wage, but they're benchmarked against, so they're consistent to the general arts sector. So all of those checks and balances happen at the assessment stage and at the approval stage. And then finally, we have a built-in monitoring and evaluation framework. And because we are a year-round team, there are opportunities to check in with organisations throughout the lifetime of that grant. So all of that is considered and undertaken. Thank you.
Helen.
Yeah, thanks. And thank you for the reassurance about the assessment of the application and that there is some monitoring, but I'm not sure that that quite answers the question about whether we know that the things that we funded have offered value for money. And it might be helpful that we see something back here that says we funded these, this was their stated purpose, and this is what we see at the end of the funding period, that they've delivered on this, this or this, or there's more to do on something else.
Thank you. These are small grants, so I think we need to bear that in mind. And because they're small grants and they sometimes value for money considerations, I think, which are important because this is the corporation's money and it's looking to enable things. But I think also these are small organisations often looking at doing creative things within the city, sometimes for the first time. And sometimes the barriers that the city creates for these are not value for money. So we do need to make those considerations as well. I would also maybe counter that whether it is appropriate to look at investigating value for money on small grants, because it would require considerable officer time to do that and bring that back. And you know, the team's budget to work on this programme is.
I think we get the point, Helen, which is that we understand value for money is really important. We can't overlook it, but at the same time, we only have a finite amount of officer resource to be able to evaluate everything.
I absolutely understand that, but I think what you said is that there's an ongoing monitoring process. Now, it would seem to me that ongoing monitoring process could simply say, yes, this scheme has delivered its stated objective. So I'm not asking for additional work or a different extra analysis. It's just some feedback on the monitoring process that could reassure us that even though they're small grants, I think it's still reasonable to expect that they do what they say they're going to do, because it will help guide us in future applications.
Thank you. I think that point's made. Jack, do you want to come back very quickly on that?
Happy to build it into any future annual reporting.
Sorry, I'm just Annie is indicating.
Yeah, sorry. So I'll come to Annie and then I'll come to Tessa.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I fully agree with Helen. On page 23, actually, we do have an appendix which lists the initiatives in 24-25, and it's not too onerous. So if we had another column that suggests what was the outcome of that initiative, for example, the work with refugee and migrant women and girls through visiting the City of London, it would be really useful to see how many actually managed to come and visit, or when we had the performances, various performances, would it be too difficult to follow that up, that actually, yes, an audience had viewed that performance, etc., etc. So I fully agree that we should have something not too onerous, but it would be useful to have the impact. So next time round, we know better which applications to proceed and which one potentially to reject.
Thank you. Yes, I think we're getting a clear steer on that. Tessa, do you have another point?
Yeah, slightly related. If there's surplus funding and not enough applications, what's the process for existing City of London-based cultural organisations like XLP or Shoe Lane Library, who are doing a lot of good community work on the ground, to actually not have to apply but to be registered, and by registering and by knowing what the work they're doing, they automatically get a regular amount of money, so that it reduces the work for kind of promoting the fund?
Thank you, Chair. So I don't think I have ever witnessed this fund not being ever not spending its budget. We often have 4 times the amount of applicants to the amount of funding that we have to distribute. I mean, our team oversee not just this grant programme, but the Sill Neighbourhood Fund, the other central grants programme, variety of other city funds. So I think there is a lot of options for organisations to apply. But I think the the principle of an application is important because you need to check and do due diligence on an organisation rather than just rely on the fact that, you know, they are a well-known partner potentially, because it gives us an opportunity to check at any given time whether that organisation is still a good and well-run organisation, because these things can change throughout time. So I think, you know, on the first point, I very much doubt that there's ever going to be a point where we have surplus money left over for this programme. But also, I think, yeah, the other point on having that opportunity for organisations to apply is an important sort of checks and balances for the corporation and its distribution of funding.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any more points. This is for information. Melissa.
Just Chair, to what extent is the new culture strategy going to align with the grant making strategy? Is there going to be any alignment? Because it doesn't seem that aligned as it stands at present.
And I'm going to let the Deputy Chair answer that one.
Yeah, Melissa, we raised this in the call over, that it's very important that we capture all these grants through the implementation programme, and in relation to the commitments and priorities, see where that grant funding fits, so that we bring it all together, because otherwise, as you say, it's all siloed and not related and linked.
Thank you, everyone. So as this item is for information, I think the clear takeaway from this is we want a bit more evidence of the value for money, and in particular, whatever we funded has actually happened, right? So I think Jack's taken that away. So thank you, Town Clerk. Next item.
Okay, so the next item is for decision, and that's Sculpture in the City, the 14th edition, and proposals for the future delivery.
Omkar, are you going to? Yep.
But this item presents the work that the team have done on this important project for us, Sculpture in the City, which some members may remember we only took on for 1 year when culture was under innovation and growth. When Emma took on as SRO for culture, that project then transferred over to us, but we've been thinking about more innovative ways that we can start to or continue to deliver this initiative. And the second part of this paper presents for members an option to transfer the management and delivery of the project to an outside entity. I think, and I hope Chair will support me on this, I think we need to be innovative in the way that we're thinking about delivering our projects. And in the past 13 years on this one in particular, we've both been responsible for the governance, the management, the oversight, the delivery, everything, and actually we need to make a decision on if we want to continue to be all of those, taking on all of those roles, or if actually we can deliver things in different ways and using partnerships to really leverage the things that we have done. So we're happy to take questions on both the current edition and also the proposal to transfer the delivery and management of the project into an external entity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Omkar, and I would agree with you that partnerships at the very heart of the cultural strategy that's being developed. And I think this is a good example of how they can work in a very positive way. But has anybody got questions or points they would like to make on this item? Elizabeth.
I suppose, thank you, Chair. It makes sense to me that this is transferred, but at the moment, the detail on composition of the board being absent, really, it feels like it's a bit early to be making the decision until we understand how the power is being retained or given up, and the sort of detail around that. So that was my thought.
It's a fair point, Elizabeth. I think, you know, we don't have that final clarity at the moment, but we're moving in a certain direction. And I think if we can approve the direction we're going, then I think that's the right way to go. But I appreciate what you're saying. Adam, and then I'll come to Leila.
Well, following on from Elizabeth, there is reference, in fact, to previous CICs, but it's not very clear how they've survived and they're still running, and have they worked? And I wonder if someone can bring us up to date on that.
Omkar?
So, thank you. I think the reference there is to do with Drumworks, and when it was done over 10 years ago, it is still running as an organisation. I'm not close to it in terms of what it does and what it achieves at this point in time, but I know it's still in operation. What I do know is that it's the only example that I could find in the corporation, so we're certainly not an expert in doing this type of thing, which does present a risk to us. And also picking up the original point there about the composition of the board, I think two things. You're absolutely right. We haven't detailed that, and that would happen at a later date. So this is essentially seeking the decision in principle. But there is a question that I've been trying to work out with the legal team on what is it that's actually transferring, and is it intellectual property, and actually who is responsible for setting up the board, and if it's us, are we therefore taking an ongoing responsibility and liability for doing that? And that's something that the legal team have been supporting me on. We haven't quite got there yet with the answer, which is why we're looking to delegate, do the decision via delegated authority, because we do recognise there's quite a lot of work yet to take place. But I would consider that to be sort of operational detail.
Layla, did I see your hand up? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. What are the financial implications of this switch? Because it seems to me the main objective is to save money. How much money would you expect to cut from what the city spends, and how much would you expect the fundraising to raise? Thank you.
So in the last year, we've had a cash contribution of £50,000 into this, and also we have an in-kind contribution. So the team in excess of 125,000 in terms of staff costs to deliver this. So if it was a complete transfer cutover and we had no more team or cash, then that essentially could be a direct saving. The paper does speak about a potential phased handover and things that we could do in order to support the new entity in terms of, let's say, the first year of delivery. So we're open to those sorts of models. The paper also refers to a request that may come then into the neighbourhood SIL fund, which is completely separate from money that CHL manages, but it would still be money that the corporation is, it comes via the corporation. So again, that's separate to this. So it may be that some of that support via neighbourhood SIL is able to help the running. So it could be shifting budgets somewhat, but in one case, we could make a direct saving of our 50k plus staff costs. In another example, some balance of that, and we may wish to carry on with a smaller investment and continue as a partner. So all of these things are yet up for debate at this point in time.
Thank you, Omkar. Bronick.
Thank you, Chair. It seems to me that we're considering a couple of different things all wrapped up together. Number one is having sculpture in the city a good thing to do? Number two is, how do we fund it ourselves and other people? And the third thing is, what corporate entity you do it within. I think if you read the report, and certainly in my experience, it is a very good idea. It's good from a tourist point of view, a destination city point of view, even before destination city was conceived of. And it does make walking around the city very interesting. So I think clearly we should want as a committee to continue. The second thing is, how's it funded? Based on the numbers you just gave us, it's costing us about 150,000 a year on direct staff costs and then some other costs. But at the same time, as I understand it, those partners currently do contribute to that. So it's not as if it's costing us 150, they're already spending that money to do that. So it seems to me it's quite possible for the current structure to continue, whether we are accepting the 150,000 or not. Given the debate we just had over spending much smaller amount of money, we're going to then, if you put it in a separate CIC, I know there's no political oversight of that spend because no elected members are able to be on the board. We will still end up giving money, whether it's 50 or 150, whether it comes from our budget or the SIL budget. it's still going to be spent, and it sort of disappears. But actually, that's part of our local authority activity to enhance the public realm. So I'm all for it continuing. I'm personally all for it expanding, getting more money from partners. If you can get into a CIC, you sure as hell can get it. People do trust us with their money. You don't have to have the CIC to say, please trust us. And I'd be very cautious about wanting to put it and package it up and sort of send it out into the dark blue sea with some money of us going forward and no real political oversight.
Carl, would you like to come back on that?
Thank you, Brian. I think if that is if we continue to keep it in house, it certainly has the benefit that we retain control, but that will be at a cost. I mean, it's a fairly simple seesaw. My personal view is that the corporation should possibly be looking at seed funding these sorts of things, maybe for 3 or 5 years. This is now 13, 14 years old. It's a teenager. It should now be self-sufficient. If it had been managed with that focus in the first 13 years, absolutely, it would have had. It could have got there. It wasn't, and I think that through the work of this committee, we've better grasped the dynamics of the programme. There's a reserve. It's starting to look healthier, but actually, it's not just our single opinion. The partners also are really pushing for a change, and I know Hiscox is there as a founding partner as well, but the partners are wanting to create a bigger change than we're able to do with the current resources that we have. So we're trying to respond to that dynamic. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but there is leveraged money, so there's at least 5 times more money coming into this from all of the partners than from what we're putting in as a contribution.
Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with other members' comments around the governance and the importance of political oversight. It seems to me that I think there seems to be support for sculpture in the city, but there's a recognition that it is an important part of our strategy, our culture strategy and destination city. And I agree with Bronick that one way or another, this will continue to have corporation funding allocated to it. And therefore, in terms of delivering that strategy and making sure that money is spent properly, particularly if it comes from City Fund, which is taxpayers' money, we must maintain political oversight. And therefore, my view is that the board composition is not an operational detail, it's a fundamental aspect of governance. So I'd be very nervous about agreeing option 3 to transfer to a CIC without at least agreeing that the board composition is something that will come back to this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Stephen. Omkar, do you want to?
I mean, we can bring board composition certainly back to committee, and when we've set up other boards, for example, the Destination Advisory Board, we did bring all of those members back to board members back to committee for approval.
Annie.
Thank you, Chair. I fully agree with the previous comments regarding governance and members or committee oversight. Just wanted to clarify the figures, because I remember 2 years ago we had a contribution around 250,000 because of certain things slipped and the governance again was a bit messy at the time. But I do not recall seeing these kind of figures that are presented in the appendices regarding 1 million in year 1 and year 4 again is 1.5, or year 3 is 1.5 million. So I just wanted to clarify is the current 14th edition cost us similar amounts? And then secondly, are we confident that in this governance, this proposed CIC structure, we would be able to attract this kind of funding versus the corporation being the main sponsor of it in its current format?
Okay, so the figures presented in the report year 1 that you're referring to are figures that form the proposed way forward. It's not what we're doing in the current year. Our figures are a lot smaller than this. So this represents the desire for partners on SITC to transform the programme, going out to a much bigger pool of funders. And so the projections in here for year 1 and onwards represent that strong desire to continue. And sorry, your second point.
The confidence in getting, because exactly, if it's now manifold of the current program and already we had issues with partners, some of them actually did not give us the funding 2 years ago. So how confident we are that we can attract 8 partners at 75k each, and if not, what is the fallback position, especially if we make this vehicle, create this vehicle?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. Thank you. The confidence has been initially tested through this work that's been done. The organisation went to and spoke to other partners in order to have conversations around expanding this. There was a really good response. Also, conversations were had taking it outside of the footprint that it currently is, which is again quite developmental. What would we have in terms of running and tracking this? So I think the safety cushion that's being implemented here is a smaller year 1, which now enables you to have that 1 year of much bigger fundraising, and then that would govern your program going forward. Would we, as there is a question yet on who would be responsible for tracking that? So would it be the corporation? Would it be the KIC? And what is the governance around that? My current view is that we're transferring it to the KIC, then it should be the board of directors of the KIC that would take the responsibility for managing and tracking that.
Take a couple more questions, then we'll try and make progress. So, Adam.
I think there's general agreement that sculpture in the city is a good thing and therefore should be supported. My concern is that it's being supported, as we now stand, by the City Fund, which is a somewhat stretched fund. And really, should we be looking at finding other ways of supporting the City Fund by not spending so much money on this, which is back to the CIC?
Before we got to this point, there were several conversations across other committees, including at RASC, the Resource Allocation Subcommittee, and at that point it was clear that we had exhausted all other avenues, but at that time it was our decision whether we were able to continue to support the programme through local risk budget, which is dispersed through this committee into the culture team. So the challenge is that we only have so much resource, and if we are developing the culture strategy, then we are earmarking that resource, and so we could divide our already limited budget to continuing to support this programme.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Chair. Stella is obviously really key as Director of Sculpture in the City, and I'd just be interested to know what she feels and what's her vision for Sculpture in the City as Director. And she's key for the relationships and the growth of it. What does she think about the CIC?
I mean, the arrangement is that it's a supplier, so we wouldn't normally have sort of strategic and policy conversations with suppliers. In this case, we've been transparent in the conversations that we've had at the partner board level, and I don't think there's any objection to this type of model being established. So we've convened all of the current partners, patrons and suppliers, but we haven't explicitly asked her for her opinion given that her relationship, and I don't want to preclude her from taking part in this in the future, so it's quite a delicate conversation there.
I wonder if it's because it'd be good to know also how involved she would remain, because I think that would be a kind of key.
That's one for the board of directors of the KIC. I don't think I can preempt any of that.
Gabby.
Thank you, Chair. I would be concerned at the moment. You have cutting edge sculptures. You have Ai Weiwei. You've got top notch artists' work that's been contributed. And if we lost our steer on it and it went to a totally independent board, it's very easy for them to get also ran pieces. The example I'm looking at is Frieze Art Fair this year, and the sculpture offer was completely different. It was not at the level that it's been previously.
I think just to be clear, the city would retain its discretion over what is put within the city, so it would retain its planning commitments on what happens. That goes through, as you know, City Arts Initiative, so it's not as if they could just suddenly start putting in things that we would not approve of. So that quality would absolutely be maintained.
Thank you.
Thank you. The concern seems to be about the level of control that we maintain over this. Everybody seems to think sculpture in the city is a good idea, and clearly it is. I'm just wondering whether it would be possible for maybe officers to bring a paper to us just to taking that point on board, to explain how the CIC could operate, but with us retaining the degree of control that we would want. So in terms of individuals who sit on the CIC, whether or not officers and members could, have some sort of majority control over that organisation. I don't know very much about CICs and how they operate and whether that would be inconsistent, but because obviously we want the private investment to come in, hopefully, but we want to retain control over the quality. So is there not a way forward where we can achieve those two objectives through a CIC, or is that not possible?
We're happy to look at that, but my immediate thoughts are the ratio of the investment is certainly not 50-50. The externals provide a lot more money to this than we do, and a starting point might be to I think we're probably talking about the composition now, and we may structure the composition so that it's aligns with who is paying. And unless we want to up our investment, which I can't recommend that we do, it's difficult to then make a case for having more than 51% control, which I assume is what you're asking for, Deputy Chair.
So I think we've got Helen, then Matthew, then Wendy.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is quite a tricky one, actually, because when you read the paper, you can see that the funding has been passed a bit from pillar to post, and that suggests to me that there's a doubt about the perceived value of this programme sculpture in the city. I'm not clear that transferring the ownership is necessarily going to make a significant difference, and my apologies if I've missed something, but I haven't heard in the conversation too much that would lead me to be more confident about that. I think the other thing I would say is that there are some businesses in the city who have already funded through their own developments various pieces of work that could be described as sculpture in the city. And I think that the bids probably have got quite an important role in this, and I'm not confident that the support or otherwise from the bids has been properly or robustly explored. I know there was a presentation of Destination City Board, but my recollection of that was that there was no real action came from it. Again, forgive me if I've misremembered that, but I don't recall any specific action coming from it. But it does seem to me that if this is to continue, and I have to say I have a doubt in my mind at the moment, because the city is clearly not in a position to fund it, given, as I've said, the way the ball's been passed from one to another, that we've yet got an option that secures funding, that delivers the objectives that you are presenting or wanted here. And I just wonder whether the recommendation 3 has been worked through to sufficient detail yet for us to be able to say, yes, we would support it.
Just to thank you for that. Just to come back on the point on engaging the bid. So EC Bid has been a major supporter of the project and have also undertaken the study here in Appendix 2 in order to do this, and they would continue to be a major investor and supporter of this going forwards.
But I think that's one of 5 bids, have we now?
And conversations have already had, so going out of the boundary of the existing bid.
So the conversations with the other bids, where are they leading us?
But they've happened in the due diligence in order to think about where might this go in the future, but that's 3 to 5 years time. The immediate step for the next 1 or 2 years would be to firmly establish a base in the current footprint before then expanding is the proposal here.
Matthew, did you want to say something?
Just at the risk of my first time back in this meeting to sound like a complete Philistine, but I'm not entirely convinced that I think it's a good idea at all. That seems to be taking up a great deal of time and effort and money when there's an enormous amount of time, effort and money needed for cultural gems we already have.
Wendy.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think I'm the only person here that probably remembers we used to have something called the City Arts Trust, and we ran the City of London Festival. I sat on the board, and so did lots of other people, somebody from the Bank of England. We had a past Lord Mayor, several past Lord Mayors, in fact. And it was registered in Companies House. The corporation gave us a hefty grant, but we also attracted donations to help us run the annual City of London Festival. Now, I don't know how this differs in that we cannot be directors on it, and I certainly wouldn't support anything that didn't have member input to keep a hold on, as has already been mentioned, the artistic input. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. I'm going to take one more question, and then we're going to move on. Caroline.
Thank you. It wasn't really a question, Chairman. It was to pick up something that Wendy and then Matthew said. The reason why the City of London Festival didn't work is because it ran out of money, and sculpture in the city was very much in danger of exactly the same thing happening, because after the event, the additional costs that would come in, things like taking the sculptures away and so on. So the only route that really is sensibly left is option 3, but perhaps with more negotiation in terms of the governance and how the governance is actually worked out. And I think we've got to be careful not to conflate the issues, because controlling it ourselves has not worked, because it doesn't give the flexibility to go out externally. That's the crux of it. Thank you.
I think that's a really good summary, Caroline, actually, and thank you very much for making it, because I think we're now in a position where, Wendy, I'll take one quick intervention from you.
Just a point of order. The City of London Festival ran for many years. It started in the 60s and it certainly ran till about 10 years ago.
Thank you. So I think we're in a position where I think there's broad agreement we can move forward, but with reservations, particularly over the governance. So can we move forward on that basis? We're not agreeing a finality of this decision at the moment. It's a direction of travel, and the committee's made very, very clear that it wants more input into how the corporation would be represented by members in any change.
Chair, I'm sorry, I'm not sure that that as you've expressed it is what everybody in the committee has been saying. So I'm not sure how much. I'm actually not sure how much support there is for option 3.
What are you saying, Helen?
Well, I think we should. I don't know whether we would need to take a vote or something. I don't know, but just looking at some of the expressions around the room, I'm not sure that, as you stated, that we progress with the kick is necessarily what the committee wants. I mean, others will correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure that there was that overwhelming support in the room.
Okay, so would the committee prefer that we defer this and come back with more clarity over option 3 and how the corporation will ensure that we are very much involved in that decision-making body should it go ahead? Are we all agreed on that? That makes sense, Town Clerk? We'll bring it back with more clarity. Okay, thank you. Town Clerk, next item.
Thank you. The next item is on Keats House. So that's the achievements at Keats House, with a request to confirm that the risk register is satisfactorily sets out the risks.
Rob, I assume you'd like to say a few words.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, afternoon, members. I hope this is an interesting update at the mid-year point about achievements at Keats House. Just to draw your attention, I think most members know it is our centenary year, and I'm delighted to say that following the launch of the Keats House 100 exhibition in May, we've seen a significant increase in visitors to the house and actually sustained that further through the year than we might expect at this point. So still quite busy at the house, and in no small part due to some of the great coverage that we received, press and media, as a result of Andrew's work here to promote the exhibition and the ongoing programme. I'd also like to just draw members' attention to one significant achievement this year, and it is a significant achievement, the achievement of a Sanford Award for Outstanding Heritage Education Provision at the House. I think it's a bit anecdotal, but the assessor certainly said you're the smallest institution to achieve a Sanford Award. So I need to get that confirmed properly, because that in itself is a great thing, I think, and testament to the quality of learning at all levels and all ages that goes on at Keats House. Also included in the mid-year update, members receive twice yearly an update on risk at Keats House. Most of these have been present for the last few reports that members will have seen and are progressing in the right direction. However, we have added this time a red risk currently for tree failure. Members, particularly those who sit on the Natural Environment Charities or board, will understand how much our trees have been in distress, particularly this year. And it is an issue across natural environment open spaces where we're very closely monitoring the health and the risks of the trees on our properties. The actions being taken currently are to work with particularly the North London Open Spaces ARB team, who conducts an annual inspection. That's the most frequent inspection regime of the spaces. All the trees are assessed, and following one particular recent branch fall, emergency work was carried out the next day to make that safe, and then some further reduction in the following weeks. And we're currently working with them to produce a report on that particular tree with a recommendation to reduce its crown height and conduct those works as soon as possible. So I totally understand and share members' concern to see a red risk on one of the charities under your stewardship, but we will progress rapidly to make sure that that risk is reduced to a tolerable level. But I think you will understand that we will not be able to completely eliminate that risk, but we can take all steps to reduce it to a reasonable level. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you to you and your team, and congratulations on the Sanford Award. And I would encourage anybody that hasn't been to Keats House to go. It's an absolutely phenomenal place, really inspiring. So congratulations on all the work you've been doing. In terms of the trees, I should say at the consultative committee last week, members very forcefully made the case that, you know, having any kind of red risk is not acceptable. I know that you're doing everything you can to reduce that, but I appreciate it's not easy, but you are doing everything that can be done. Members, any questions on this item? I'm not seeing any, so we can approve. Apologies, Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we did express some considerable concern in the meeting on Friday in relation to the red risk, because obviously that poses a risk of fatality. It's visited by numerous children in terms of the library, so there is a risk of a tree fall. So thank you, Rob, but it really does need to be dealt with as a matter of some urgency. And I'm just wondering if we could have a time frame on when that work is going to be carried out to reduce that risk down from red to amber. Because if one works one's way through the various tables, at the moment we are being told that there is a risk of a fatality in relation to that tree in that garden, which is visited by members of the public. So this isn't just something that we can do as and when the mood takes us. We really need to reduce that risk down from red to amber. Now that the committee has been told about it, so. Is this going to be escalated up and arboriculturalists sent on site with tree surgeons to remove the limbs as a matter of some urgency? We really do need to get on and do that work.
Rob.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deputy Chair. Yes, to reassure you that although the target date on there is 31st of March, that is the date of your next report to committee. So the work will be conducted well within that timescale. It has already been raised and escalated further this morning following our meeting on Friday at the House. And you can be assured that we will take very prompt action as soon as we can get contractors on site, and the ARB team will be there prior to that to inform the works.
Caroline.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to reassure people, we have 60,000 ancient and veteran trees across the City of London, City Corporation estates, and we have a very well-versed prioritising programme to decide on actions that take place with trees. So this is one example. Another example could be overhanging trees of pathways where people walk. So it is a very well-versed path of action. I can't resist the link up to when the city moves forward talking about climate action, for example, post 2027. Our biggest challenge across our whole estates is water resilience and the effect on trees, which will make a massive difference with that moving forward. So there are other things that are interlinked, and we did fight hard in natural environment and across our open spaces portfolio for this to be moved and kept to red risk, so it wouldn't be able to be lessened as a red risk across the portfolio, because that would mean that it wouldn't be given the priority action that it needs, because what we need to be sure is that officers are taking the mitigations to mitigate on that risk. So you wouldn't want it moved from red across the portfolio, but I'm sure Rob is working with us all the time anyway, so I'm sure that Rob will make sure that this is prioritised within the actual within this heritage item. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. So can we approve the achievements and the risk management update? Yes, thank you. Town Clerk.
Thank you. So we have a verbal update on the National Year of Reading.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to take the opportunity to highlight that next year is the National Year of Reading, which is a government initiative which is backed by the National Literacy Trust. And this has come about because the National Literacy Trust did some research that found that only 1 in 3 children and young people aged 8 to 18 currently read for pleasure in their free time, and only 1 in 5 read daily, which is obviously concerning because we know that reading gives you the best chances in life. There's also been research by the Reading Agency around adult reading, which is also, it is decreasing in London. It's not necessarily decreasing overall, but what reading is changing a lot for obvious reasons. We actually all read all the time, but that depth of reading is being lost. So the theme of the National Year of Reading is called Go All In, and the idea is that you are focusing down on what you're reading. So whatever you're interested in is, then you are reading in depth around it. That's where they're aiming to get people at. And in terms of sort of the library service, the City of London, we are currently putting together a programme of activity. The team are coming up with lots of different ideas, which we will be rolling out across the year. What I wanted to highlight was that the chair kindly set up a meeting with KPMG, who are one of the sponsors of the National Year of Reading, and the National Literacy Trust, to talk in a bit more depth about any ways that they could support us in the city. Where they are very interested at the moment in our Read to Succeed scheme, which is where we have volunteers supporting young people with learning to read. We are exploring a potential of a festival of reading next year, and they are also, because we are the lead authority on the London Library's Read On app, which I believe I have brought here before, but it's an app that encourages people to read, to get back into reading. It's a sort of couch to 5K for reading. And so they were also interested in perhaps supporting some work around that, but it's very early days on that at the moment. I suppose I also wanted to sort of highlight to the committee that one of the things that we might be looking for is reading champions in the community, and that might be a place where you could all get involved, because what we want to do is really make sure that everybody in the City of London is reading next year, and what better way to do that than for yourselves to be leading as part of that. So I think I just wanted to sort of make people aware of that, basically, and obviously I'll bring back any further progress on it in terms of what our programme is going to be looking like. We're just firming it up, as I said, but I wanted an opportunity to really put it sort of bring it to your attention now, basically.
Thank you, Rachel. We look forward to further updates. Does anybody want to say anything on National Year of Reading? No. Okay, Town Clerk, next item.
Thank you. The next item, therefore, is number 9. That's the culture strategy, and that is for, there are 3 approvals required there.
Yes, just for clarity, this is for decision rather than information as listed on the agenda. Omkar.
Thank you, Chair. So we are bringing back a report on the development of the culture strategy. One of the actions from committee last month was to form a working group. That group was formed with the chair and the deputy. This version that you see in front of you reflects the output from that group. I think it's a relatively short report, so I'll take it as read, and I don't think it needs any further introduction. The headlines are: we've recut the report now into 11 foundational commitments and priorities, opportunities and additional consideration. Chair, over to you.
Thank you, Omkar. So a lot of work has been going on this. So thank you to officers for all their work. No doubt we're going to have some questions. So who has the first question on this? Good, so I thought we were going to get away with no questions there. Adam, and then coming to Jason.
First thing, before the questions, actually, I'm very supportive of what the first two things we're being asked to do, which is to improve the commitment and to improve the hierarchy. So that's absolutely fine. And I also welcome this report because it's bringing a lot of things together which I've been long waiting for, and I'm delighted to see them. So that's really good news. I'm slightly worried about the final bit where we move on to the next stage, and the next stage is in 2 parts. It is one. Let's get back to the next step is to refine the foundational commitments, etc., which is fine. And then we have the stakeholder engagement, and I'm not quite sure whether these are 2 things are going to be running together or separate, because it will lead to, if we're not careful, even longer before we actually get round to having a cultural strategy to look at. And I just wonder if that's the question, really, is how these 2 things are going to operate together.
Omkar.
Thank you. So in terms of the next stage, if I can clarify, that the desire is really to bring a strategy with a detailed action plan and implementation, and approving 1 and 2 will then enable us to baseline and then build that plan on the recommendations and priorities that are approved. In terms of the stakeholder engagement, what we have recognised is that with Chair and Deputy, we recognise that we want to go further with the corporate world here, and we think there's a real opportunity in order to bring them along the journey. And we have done some of that, and I think the long list in the back of several hundred stakeholders engaged to date makes a good starting point, but there are very specific corporates that we want to engage going forwards, and that is the specific intervention that we want to make here. And I think the idea is that those meetings will be supported by the Chair and Deputy of this committee.
Yep.
Adam.
Can I just come back? My real concern is to what stage is the draft of the cultural strategy going to be shared with stakeholders? Because I think there is a point we can continue talking to stakeholders and never get anywhere. We just really need to move it on. It strikes me that actually, if the suggestion of item 16, which is what you're saying is what we're doing with the cultural strategy, is then moved ahead. And if that is used as something to share with the stakeholders, that seems to me would be a very strong way of going forward.
Yes, I'm going to let the Deputy Chair, would you like to answer that?
Thank you. I think the idea is twofold. Firstly, in relation to the foundational commitments and priorities, that is going to form the kind of cornerstone of the cultural strategy. But what we need to do is we need to produce a narrative around that. If you look at, for example, Westminster's cultural strategy, there is a contextualisation and a narrative around that. So that work just needs to be done. It's not going to be adding anything more to it. It's just going to be giving more explanation around it. In relation to the commitments and priorities, I think there is a concern at the moment that there has perhaps been very extensive consultation with certain interest groups and less consultation with deliveries and with the big corporates. So before we absolutely finalise these priorities and commitments, we need to undertake that exercise. And it's intended that we do that through breakfast briefings with the corporates and deliveries to say, this is what we've got in mind. What do you think about it? So that at least it gives them an opportunity to have a fuller input into it. And I think the hope is that if any members of the committee want to be involved in that exercise to act as hosts and ambassadors to that, that would be good. But that's going to be very targeted. So there will be maybe 3 or 4 breakfast briefings over the next couple of months, so that we can then hopefully craft an implementation plan as to how we're actually going to deliver these commitments and priorities. So it shouldn't delay things. It's simply just bringing it all together. So hopefully come March, April, we have got a fully worked up cultural strategy, which is a document which maybe runs to about 10 pages, but everybody's on board and we've got a mechanism as to how we're actually going to deliver it rather than just have fine words. So that's the thinking behind it.
Thank you.
Jason Groves.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm really encouraged by what the Deputy Chair has just said around building the narrative, which I think is going to be incredibly important. Something, Chair, that you and I have discussed, and I would like to see a little bit more reflected in this is, what is our vision for what we want the city to become? What brings all of these really fantastic ideas, threads them together? How do we want people to perceive us from a cultural point of view? And if I look at particularly some of the sort of the leading institutions that we've got, like the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, the Barbican Centre, and others, and if I look at the opportunities that we've got, particularly with the Smithfield redevelopment, which I think is a once in a lifetime opportunity for us to have really an incredibly significant cultural asset included as part of that. I'd just like to see a little bit of that ambition and vision sort of reflected in the strategy document, and perhaps the place to do that is within the narrative. But I worry that within our foundational commitments, there's not that sort of looking to the future, something sort of big and bold, a big bold statement. And so that would be something that I would love us to put in there, to be a real centre for culture. And to Deputy Chair's point, I'm very happy to look at hosting one of those breakfast briefings in the insurance part of the of the city. Thanks.
Extremely helpful. Thank you, Jason. You're right. We had some very good conversations, particularly around emphasising the world-class status of some of the institutions within the city. But I think you're right. Of course, we want greater ambition. At the same time, we want to create a cultural strategy that's realistic, that we can actually implement right from the beginning, rather than having something that people look at and go, well, none of this will ever happen. So, but I completely get it. And I think we'll certainly make sure that comes out. Bear in mind, this is not a final piece. We're still on a journey here. Any more questions? Sorry, Annette. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, I welcome the priorities, which I think are roughly in line with what the committee expressed in previous years regarding access to culture with ease, etc. But I would like to make a point around the consultation, which those of you who might have attended last month's session at Barber's surgeon hall, I found it incredibly painful. This sort of over consultation with so many people that you don't even recognize where it's going and to what avail. And I'm really glad to hear from the Deputy Chair that we're going to involve some serious institutions that will add to the narrative. And also back to the narrative, to Jason's point, on page 12, I still struggle with some of the words, and instead of having our core offering, such as those big institutions, London Museum, Barbican, Guildhall School of Music and Drama, we sort of get lost in some sort of adolescent narrative of having a painful history and some words that I find really struggle to connect with. So I urge that we bring it back to some sort of tangible strategy that will speak to most people, as opposed to some graduation show.
Yes,
manifest.
Deputy Chair.
Yes, Annette, we agree with you. We put that in just to hopefully show how far we've travelled, but that those are no longer being pursued.
And there will be no more workshops with things made public. Any more questions? Wendy, me.
It's just a point, Chairman. The now that the restoration of Bart's Great Hall has been completed, they've got really quite a busy cultural programme, and I'm wondering how we are mixing in with that programme of theirs.
Well, we must make sure they know about the calendar when they can add all their wonderful events. I know they've got lots of lunchtime concerts in there as well, so absolutely should be part of this moving forward. That is a hand. Is it Adam? Yes.
Sorry, it's just. Can I just add to and endorse what Jason was saying, and that is looking forward to what the place should look like in the future. We must not duck away from that. I think it's critically important. And I think it's very important with our link with Destination City, because Destination City at the moment seems to be looking at what happens in the next year. What they should be thinking about is what the city's destination really should be, which will be in 10, 15, 20 years' time. So that's the link that I think we need to work on.
Point understood and taken. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Jason. Any more? Okay, members, can we approve this? Thank you. Town Clerk.
Thank you. So we have an update from the audience agency. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm Carl.
Thank you, Chair. So last time we presented the audience agency's population survey report, members received that report and requested a chance to Q&A, and we have invited Anne, apologies if I pronounce your surname incorrectly, Torogiani from the audience agency to provide members with a narrative really around that report, because it contains a lot of detail in that report, and we we're at a point where it was an interim position and there is a lot more coming, and Anne is also going to talk about the future. So without further ado, Anne.
Yeah, I mean, I think it might be worth just doing a quick background walk through the research that we've been doing, but I'll make it really quick so that we can just get on to your questions. Essentially, we were doing this piece of research was originally commissioned in several stages in order that we could be highly responsive to the development of the cultural strategy as it was happening. I guess our brief, if you like, was to lean more into the demand side of the development of the strategy. You know, in a way, things went public. We're working very closely, lots of consultation with more of a supply side set of stakeholders. We were thinking a lot about audience in the broad sense. So I think there is some interesting crossover with Destination City potentially, but at the moment we've just been looking at audiences, and I suppose we've been looking at people that engage with culture in the city, could engage with culture in the city, either as visitors or as near residents and so on. So we phased it really because we knew there was already a lot of information available. We wanted to make the most of that. There are actually 47 different reports which were telling us something about audiences. So our phase one was just to look at what we already knew, what were the information that was already available from several years of research, and then to identify where the gaps were. So our stage two was really about best method within resources to address some of what we thought were critical gaps. And as we move into stage 3 and 4, it's really about how do we take all of those insights and put them into a really useful context in terms of the implementation of the strategy. So I'll just quickly talk you through that. So as I say, at stage 1, we found, there was a lot in those 47 reports that helped us understand. We also looked at quite a lot of the data that's held by some of the larger institutions. We looked at some of, some of the, the Audience Agency holds quite a lot of data for some of the institutions. So we looked at, broadly what was the catchment area of who was coming in. Most of them, most of your audiences come from London itself, from the London boroughs, 14% from the southeast. Quite a high number of international visitors as well is quite interesting, which is slightly fall outside of this exercise, but we'll come back to those. So we found out some useful stuff. We found out that around about 10%, depending which study you looked at, around about 10% people were visiting the city specifically for the cultural offer. And we knew some very vague things about people liking the idea of doing something different when they got here, all of which was a good starting point, but not really enough to base a strong strategy on. So in our next stage, what the report didn't tell us was really about what motivates people. So the motivation information we had was very generic and very bland. So we really wanted to hunker down more on why different sets of people were interested in what the city had to offer. So that's where we went in the next stage. We were particularly interested in the interplay between people who work in the city and how they respond to the cultural offer. We wanted to look at next gen younger audiences, how they might be changing with that longer 10-year trajectory, if you like, but also thinking about the talent pipeline in terms of city workers in the future. We wanted to look at lots of the institutions that we did some little bit of talking to. We're particularly interested in the different times of the day and week and how that might respond to things. So we also looked a little bit at how the needs of local audiences were a little bit different. So our next stage research was a large scale panel survey. That's not particularly audiences, that's just of the general public, representative in a number of different ways. And we found some pretty strong intel from that research exercise, which is, I think, the report that you had, my colleague's very, very granular report that was talking a lot about, what kinds of different people are visiting the city and what it is that they particularly look at, are looking for rather. So I think one of the things was, we can see how competitive the city's cultural offer is with that large, what we would call a sort of metro cultural audience that come here. You do very well with that audience, but actually they are all sorts of cultural offers all around London are competing for them. So it gave us some good intel about how you might compete better for some of that for market share there. Quite a lot of interesting differences between certain kinds of audiences in search of the city's heritage hidden gem kind of offer, and then perhaps a slightly different offer audience interested in the sort of more vibrant city kind of end of the offer, if you like. And then again, a sort of third set of interests around a much more local, community oriented form of cultural offer. So this gave us some really good intel that we were able to start splitting those out into different groups of people, looking at how many, how often, and so on. And we also looked at how demographics overlaid on that and their communications preferences. It gave us some good indicative information about how city workers do or don't respond to the cultural offer. We're hoping that, I think there's some new research has been commissioned at the moment. We're going to be able to feed into the process around that. So. And what we weren't able to do with this piece of research was to look at international audiences, but we do have some commitment from London Museum to share some of their intel with us that we can feed into the process. And I think Destination City has some useful intel as well. So we'll be looking at some secondary information around that as well. So we're now moving into stage 3 and 4. What do we do with all of this information? How do we put it together in a way that's useful and interesting to the development of the cultural strategy and its implementation? So particularly we're looking at 3 things really. One is a final report which matches what we found out against the priorities and commitments made. But also helping to outline a very top-line audience strategy. What kinds of audiences are the opportunity, where there are risks around certain audiences, and so on. So something that's quite high level that will sit next to the cultural strategy. The second thing, which I'm just going to show you very briefly as I finish, the idea of a sort of an extensive segmentation and like an audience handbook, showing you the different audiences to be shared more broadly with all kinds of stakeholders who may be programming as well as the city itself around the city. And then linked to that, an audience monitoring framework talking about what kinds of data to be collecting in what way, using some of the readily available tools that we now have at our fingertips in terms of collecting population data and other arts data. So there are 3 outputs that we're working on at the moment, if you like. And just to show you what I mean by a segmentation and handbook, when we look at the data, we can broadly speaking look at something, you can sort of see within it something like about 9 different segments, 9 different groupings of people who may have an interest in different aspects of that emerging cultural offer. We can group them into sort of 3 groups around the orange group there being sort of highly engaged, people who are very arts interested, all about competing for their interest, if you like, in different ways. They split down into various in different ways. Then you have a sort of middle band of people who are not a little bit less culturally active, but actually we know they're interested in some of the things the city has to offer. And then sort of a less engaged group of people who are not that arts active, but living very much on the edges and around the city itself, very close by. We know that sort of less arts engaged people tend to want to do things that are very hyper locally, very much in the local area. So that's an opportunity around all these different groups, but they all look a little bit different. They link to our audience agency segmentation of the population. We've got thousands of data records that are telling us about these kinds of different behaviours, but they are specific to the city. We've added on some things to help us to understand what it looks like for you. So excuse the complicated diagram, but just looking here. So if you sort of think about, you've got kind of one way of thinking about audiences is how close they are to you. Are they very close by or are they further away? So you've got proximity as one axis, and then you've got level of culture engagement. Are they super arts interested or a little bit, not too sure about the arts and culture? And that helps us to map a kind of a strategy really that tells us about how to engage different kinds of audiences. And we're building up, through the research we've recently done, we've built up some really good understanding of these different groups, but that's an ongoing process that we're hoping to include as part of the strategy. City workers being a kind of an interesting body because they're relating differently to the cultural offer than people who are residents, and we want to know a little bit more about them. So that relates to, I can put my 9 different segments, I can map them onto that strategy, so different ways of engaging all of them. And the handbook will take us through what those strategies are. And here's one, as I say, there are our 9 segments split into their highly engaged, medium engaged and less engaged groups, different kinds of tactics and strategies required for each of them. And then the handbook will kind of focus in on each of those groups. And brilliant. And we'll be looking particularly at, so here's just one where we can have a look at heritage visitors, a particular group that we think we've seen, which is the next one. So heritage visitors, for example, we can link back this particular segment of people who we think might be interested to visit the city largely for its heritage offer. We can link them to the priorities for so you have little portraits about them, some kind of key bits of information, how to engage them and so on. And then we move on to things like how they are going to interact with the different suggestions and priorities within the strategy on the next slide. So we can just see them, in how they're going to relate, for example, to, how does accessing culture with ease matter to these people? What are the most important things? What kind of social, economic and place-related impacts are we thinking about? How they're going to help us to achieve those things? And go on to the next one. We know a little bit about where they live. This is a dummy map. This isn't where this particular group live, but there'll be some mapping stuff in there. And then we've got some kind of some key information about their preferences, what they like, what they don't like doing, and so on, their dislikes, what they like, their profile, and so on. And then finally, coming on to some graphs and stuff to find out this all based on the research. We just whiz through those. I'll let you have a look at these in your own time. We can come back to this, but I want to just go through it quickly. And then finally, we come on to, how do we actually engage those people? What kinds of programming appeal to them? What timing, for example, when are these people most likely to use the city? So helping us with that thing about the times of the week and so on, what pricing strategies work and so on. I think there's one more that's worth looking at. Yes, and some more things about how we might engage with those visitors. Just think about communications, what kind of community-based work they're interested in, and how we might do some co-creation with them. So it's looking at those 9 different segments and thinking about how the cultural strategy might relate to all of them. So it's an audience eye view in a very practical sense on the strategy itself. So that's what I wanted to just show as a bit of context. Does that work on class? Okay, great.
Thank you very much. You've covered a lot in a very short space of time, quite a lot to get our heads around. Does anybody have any questions? Matthew Bell.
Sorry, just going back to a point of earlier, how many of these people do you think then, if we think about something like sculpture in the city, how much would that appeal to any of those people who are on your graphs?
So what these profiles helps to understand is who is most likely to be interested in sculpture in the city. So it gives us a pretty good idea, not only who they are, but where they are, what kinds of messaging might appeal. In fact, several of those different segments will have an interest in sculpture in the city, but you might want to target it at them in slightly different ways, communicate different benefits to them. So it really helps to get quite granular with the available intelligence to kind of just help us to do that job of targeting. And I guess estimating audience, we've got some numbers behind all of that as well. We can model that out to tell you, roughly how big the market size for those things are.
Thank you, Gabby, and then Melissa.
Hello, very interesting briefing. Thank you very much. May I just ask, you'll have to excuse me because I only got an update of your report and haven't been able to print it out, so I haven't read it properly, but where do the actual city residents, those that live in the square mile, live? Which section have you put them in?
We know quite a lot about city residents, partly because we we hold quite a lot of data about audiences in general, and we do know that the city has a very particular arts engagement. So I think something like 85% of people that work in the city fit into the group that we was back. Sorry, Ruthie. So they would fit quite well into this group we call metroculturals. So they're like super arts engaged. They're a very particular group. It's a complicated tool. I won't explain how it works, but we know that a lot of your residents would fit into that sort of, they're close by metroculturals. So we know quite a lot about the immediate market. They're people who go and do arts and cultural stuff all over London. Quite a lot of them particularly like doing it on their doorstep. So they are an interesting opportunity.
Yes, your metroculturals, let's say they're Barbican residents, but the city has as many residents within the square mile and the periphery who are not within that price bracket.
Yeah, they do indeed, and so that's why in our the blue groups on our doorstep and good neighbours, these were people who we found are very local to in and around the city itself, much less arts engaged, much less well off demographically, much more sort of less entitled, let's call them, and we know the research was telling us quite a lot about their particular interests, particularly around a lot of interest in sort of community driven, community up programming, quite a lot of stuff around outdoor arts, which is why it's a particularly important part of the mix. Festivals very popular, high levels of sort of participatory creativity were all coming out very strongly in that research. So they were as represented in the sample, and we asked lots of questions about their interests. So again, it's there's quite a lot of overlap between these things. Not everybody's interested in the same thing, but a distinct preference. So we have got their interests covered in this approach.
Continue, please. And with the good neighbours, would you advocate the heritage assets, looking at their soft periods to market to them so that they became more engaged?
Well, I think there's always a question. I think the segmentation doesn't tell you necessarily what you should do, but it tells you what's likely to happen if you do. So okay, it's kind of suggesting where people might have a propensity to be more or less interested in certain things. I mean, I think there's no doubt that sometimes that rediscovering history, making it very local, making it very personally relevant, that the crowdsourced history. Those kinds of strategies work really well engaging less arts and heritage engaged communities because it makes it relevant and specific. So I think I'd say yes, but with particular approaches around it.
Thank you very much, Anne.
Thank you, Gabby, Melissa, and then Tessa.
Yeah, thank you for the report. Fascinating. I picked up on the 12% international figure, and I'm just wondering if you can clarify again, where do the international visitors fit in on this sort of 9 different segments?
Yeah, they don't actually. So this is a 9 UK based segmentation, and I think, as I say, our the remit of within, one of the things we looked at was whether or not we could afford to do some research with international visitors within the budget. So we were trying to use the budget to the best effect. We did, as I say, London Museum commissioned quite a lot of work about international visitors, and it's quite top line. They've shared some of that. They've offered to share that so that we can use it as part of this work. I believe that Destination City has some good information about international visitors as well. So it was out, you can imagine that doing audience research with potential international visitors is enormously expensive and doesn't always give you very good granular information. So I think what we want to do is to include, say, 2 indicative international segments, and additionally to the 9 the UK ones that we've got, using secondary information. It'll be a good starting point. It's not a really forensic exercise. It's an indicative way of starting, I'd suggest.
So that's going to be in the next report, is what you're saying?
Yes, in our final version, we'll include what we can get our hands on in terms of international, but it's not a dedicated specific part of the research. It's using secondary data to build a little bit of a good. So for example, we already know that we know where the major which countries most international visitors come from. So you get some basic indicative stuff. So but it wasn't that was beyond the scope of our original research brief. So we're using secondary data to sort of give a little bit of an indication of how international visitors might differ.
Yeah, I see. Just one other point was that, if you walk past, for example, 20 Fenchurch Street, which is where you can go to the Sky Garden, it is every day just absolutely chock full of people, most of whom from just listening seem to be international. And I wonder if they could provide some data and stats for you. Thank you.
Precisely. And I think part of the third part of what I was talking about, which was the audience monitoring framework, our suggestion is there's lots of juicy, exciting bits of audience research that would be really useful to come next. So we were going to give you a little shopping list of which actually you might want to come back to prioritise what we really need, the next set of gaps that we want to fill knowledge in.
Thank you, Tessa.
Yeah, the LSO, the London Symphony Orchestra, have done some quite interesting recent analysis on their audiences, and especially increasing the weekend audiences from the outer ends of the Elizabeth line. And they were recently suggesting to the corporation or to us to sort of market more of the city in those outer regions. Is that something that you've?
Yeah, I think that fits really well. One of the suggestions is that we will share this information. So organisations like the LSO do they do donate their data to the data pot. So we were thinking of once this is finished, of sharing some of that intel with them. But those kinds of ideas would make lots of sense. So you can see you've got a very broad cross-London audience are definitely coming to the city. It's not, to some extent you've got a proximity thing happening, but lots of highly arts engaged people come to the city from all over London. So it does make sense. Yeah.
Annette.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Two questions. Apologies if I missed it, but could you just remind us the methodology behind the numbers? Is it based on the panel surveys and extrapolated, or did you draw on, as you said, secondary, like existing data? If you could elaborate.
Those first numbers that I presented at the beginning, they come from the 47 different studies. So in fact, I think there was significant differences in some of the numbers. So for example, we did look at those numbers about the catchment area of London come from our data. So that's using arts data, but it's from ticketing. So it'll be skewing much more towards ticketed events than it will do, say, for outdoor events, where you're probably getting usually you're getting a slightly more local audience. I'm sure for Sculpture City, it'll be a different sort of pattern, but it's giving us a rough idea. And then we did triangulate that with some of the secondary studies. So there's quite a lot. We looked at lots of different data sources. So some of it is a bit apples and pears. So in my very brief introduction, you could have
But what's the pool of number you could?
But the number for the panel survey, which obviously then we were looking at a representative sample, that was about 2,000 people. So that's giving you an idea, so that you can break that down. It's a sample that's big enough to give you demographic breakdown. It's big enough to give us the breakdown using our segments, those things like metroculturals and so on. So we were able to say this is representative of those different groups in the population.
And the overall data you mentioned, like ticketing, talking about hundreds of thousands.
No, it's millions of records.
Millions. Okay. Okay. And then the second question. It's interesting, and the segmentation is some good insight, but I just struggle to understand how we will make use of it, in the sense that we are already struggling to use effective communication to reach people and audiences. So how we then target a specific group seems very difficult to me, unless we have a clear steer and channels and social media, etc. But it sounds very resource intensive to actually go after certain segments.
I think it's as much useful actually part of our brief was both about programming and about communication. So we do look at communication channels and the communication preferences of those different groups. But I think, but we're assuming that this is as useful for independents, partner organisations, and the city itself, kind of thing. So actually these kind of resources could be used by anybody, and I think it's not so much telling you to do 9 different campaigns. It's more saying these are your 2 obvious target audiences for this work. You might have a very strong desire to engage people who are not very engaged with that. You might have to do some hard work around it, but it's giving you the tools so that you can use resources that you do have in a slightly more focused and targeted way. So it's not about saying you need to run 9 different campaigns, or 11 actually, but it's more about saying, actually, if we want to engage more of these people, we're really interested in finding people that want to do things on Wednesday afternoons, we might think about how we're going to engage that particular group I was just looking at, for example, because they'll be very open to those kinds of offers. So it's a tool that you can use in lots of different ways, rather than just as a kind of very complicated communications tactic. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for the presentation and for your insights. Let's move on. Town Clerk.
Thank you. So are there any questions on matters relating to the work of the committee?
Not seeing any questions, no.
Thank you. And I think we've got a few items of other business.
Yes, just to say a public congratulations to Liz Scott at the Guildhall Art Gallery, who was given a Changemaker Award. So congratulations to Liz. She was here earlier, but I don't think she is here now. But very well done to her and her staff. And also just to say, we're going to be sending out invitations to the Culture, Heritage and Libraries annual reception. So if you have people in the cultural sector that you want to invite, can you please give their details to OMCAR? And we need to do that quite quickly within the next week, just to make sure if you want anybody invited to that, let OMCAR know. And that's all the updates from me. Thank you, Town Clerk.
Thank you. Do we have members' agreement to end the live stream in line with the wording set out on item 13?
We do.
Just bear with me. Okay, I can confirm that the